Discussion, especially about reproductive rights, which is enormous and complex, to whom I consider a superwoman, Leila Abulfazl.
Oh my
do.
goodness. I should just go now.
Yeah, you should.
Superwoman, bye. Thank you, Jan and Catherine. What I find, I had written something up to say right now, but I actually don't think it works, just based on the conversation that we've heard so far. And I'm thinking that because I look at the list of what Catherine just set up for us about what we want, and then Jan echoed that and this, like, what these laws actually mean. And what I'm struck by is, we could have a different world. And it's a world that is not radical, right? Child care, paid family leave, like, these are things that are just our daily lives. And they should be in effect right now. And so what I think do we cut?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You can't sit there. You can sit anywhere else. I'm sorry.
It's okay, we just got going. It's perfect timing.
From your wherever you want.
So, and I think as a reproductive rights advocate, it's very empowering to see reproductive rights very squarely in this agenda. And I also think that we are at a point where the underlying reasons for people to be anti-abortion, or that they feel very anti-abortion, is very much linked to being racist and sexist and having anti-immigrant. And we're really seeing that on display with this administration in a way that we have not been so able to so clearly show. And so reproductive justice advocates have been telling us this for a long time, and have been connecting the dots and really doing that labor, and now it's just on open display. So it's a kind of a mixed start about how this is a very empowering agenda in the sense that, like, it should all be able to be done. As Jan said, we know that it's not going to be. They may have a supportive House, but likely not a supportive Senate, and definitely not a supportive president. But that the ability to talk about these things connected, that gun violence is really in there. Climate change, I think, is the one thing that is, very much now in everybody's minds. I mean, the apocalyptic report that just came out on Friday, which, again, is very much a reproductive justice issue. Who do you think is going to be the first communities to really get affected? And Flint is already there. So when I talk about, what's on deck for reproductive rights, I think in the communities at this point are very much looking at one another in the most profound way that I hadn't seen previously. And really, I think President Trump brought us here. And the communities were doing better, and I think everybody, the advocates are doing better, and the language is better, but it is an important point I just wanted to reflect on. And again, the different themes that I heard, we didn't talk about judges, but we talked about Kavanaugh, but we didn't talk about judges, and I think that underlies all this work as well. Coming from the National Law Center, we definitely think so. So what does this mean for reproductive rights at the federal level is very much a conversation that you have to say what is going on at the state level. And so there's a lot of change at the state level, pro-choice governors getting elected, state legislator seats flipping, attorneys general, all these different changes that were really important, and my state colleagues could tell you a lot more about. But all this is to say there was good movement. But there are also still a lot of anti-choice states. And that is where we're going to see the real intersection of the federal and the state in terms of My colleague was telling me that Texas just a few weeks ago, legislators were pre-filing their terrible legislation. I mean, the scary, scary stuff. And they're doing this because Kavanaugh's now in the court and they think they have this. Y'all are hearing this. And I think the real question there is what case gets to the Supreme Court? What is the question presented? And for us to all be careful about what we're saying is what is at risk, right? For a lot of women in this country right now, there is no Roe v. Wade. And it's just the basic truth, especially in marginalized communities, lower income communities, women of color communities. They don't have a provider hundreds of miles. And so it's important for us to say, this will gut Roe v. Wade, that has happened already for a lot of women, and not to erase that. There's one clinic in Mississippi, and if you want to read a great opinion, just last week a district judge there decided a case at the district court level, go to the 5th Circuit, or maybe it's 11th, which we'll see what happens, but this district court judge was looking at some Mississippi laws that were going to restrict abortion access, and he wrote this amazing opinion. And why is it an amazing opinion is what I opened up with, is he made these connections about how the Mississippi state legislature, it was rich for them to say they're passing these laws to protect women. When you look at the stats that state has in terms of like maternal deaths and access to health care and the racial injustice history, I mean, it's profound. And he does this amazing job of connecting it. And so as my colleague said, judges matter. That opinion matters, and we'll see what happens at the circuit court, but it's all connected. So at the state level, these provisions, these laws are making their way through the court, and there's going to be cases at the Supreme Court. Who knows which ones the Supreme Court will accept? That's all happening right now. So alongside that, so the work that we do is always thinking of that. Alongside that, there's the federal level, and it is very exciting to see to think of a House that will not be the House that's been for the last 6 years. I started doing this work in the fall of 2011, and it was just unbelievable. My first hearing was one of the Where Are the Women hearings relating to the birth control coverage requirement, where the ISA, I think, had like 5 men testifying about the birth control coverage benefit. We have and have not come a long way from that point, right? I think that we have people on our side, but we did not have the court on our side, and we certainly do not have the Trump administration on our side. And so, again, we're going to see a flip. The House won't be having those hearings, those terrible hearings anymore, which will be wonderful. But who knows what the Senate will do. There are rumors that Marsha Blackburn will be on the Judiciary Committee. I'm from Tennessee. That scares me to no end. She is very much anti-woman and anti-women's health, and that kind of platform is not great. And Lindsey Graham as the chair is also very terrible. So you have a yin-yang, basically, what good we could see out of the House. And I just want to, again, point, there are a lot of issues that we're all supportive of. On reproductive rights, Jan already pointed out some. There's the Hyde Amendment, which we all hate, which 40-something years ago, a man decided to impose restrictions on federal funding that denies women health insurance coverage related to abortion, where they're providing insurance otherwise. If you think about, I was thinking about this the other day, the makeup of Congress at that time when that amendment first passed, and just thinking about who was there, and thinking about now who is going to be in the House. We're moving, but it's going to take time, and so we are very strongly in support of getting rid of the Hyde Amendment in there, so that Each Woman Act is a bill that would do just that. But again, you have the Senate. But it's just exciting to have proactive discussions of a healthcare issue that we have cared about for many years, and it's just not being dealt with. There's also Women's Health Protection Act, which is basically what happened in Whole Women's Health, the good decision of the Supreme Court from 2016. it is responding to those type of restrictions. That's like you need a certain hallway or you need water fountains, just ridiculous restrictions that are all about shutting down access. There are other riders. Our issues always get tacked on as riders to things like in North Carolina. I think it was attached to motorcycle protection bill. And here our issues get attached to every single bill. But there's other riders that we are interested in getting rid of. There's the global gag, as you all know, and there's the Weldon Amendment, which is a very weird amendment that follows the Hyde Amendment that relates to restricting states and what they can do related to abortion proactively. Then there's also what the administration is interpreting as what these amendments do. So while there's proactive movement in the House, a lot of it also will probably be responsive to what's happening in the Trump administration. So just to tick off that list for you, Jan mentioned the birth control coverage rules. They were finalized the day after the historic wave of women coming into Congress. Trump administration dropped their birth control coverage benefit rules. Those had been ready to be released for over a week. They were no longer on OMB's website for over a week, and we think they were holding them till after the election, which shows that they really know that this is not a winner for them, and yet here we are. And the birth control, so I was teaching for 2 years and I've just come back to the National Women's Law Center, and so I kind of missed this whole process of when the interim final rules came out last year, but when I saw the finalized rule, it is absolutely frightening where we are, that the extremists are running the show, and they are saying things like, in the preamble, maybe you don't really think birth control is health care. If you feel that way, why don't you email us? Because maybe we just open up this whole benefit completely and say that it's not covered as preventive care. But even where we are right now, a Fortune 500 company can claim a religious exemption to the coverage benefit. So Elon Musk, I guess, imagine, who's the GM person who just did all these layoffs, they deciding it's their religious beliefs that they shouldn't cover birth control. But then it's also just these little businesses, the small businesses throughout the country, and that's where the impact can really be felt. Where just the owner says, you know what, this conflicts with my beliefs. Now I have an opt-out. I don't have to tell anybody. I don't have to cover it. No insurance company has to step in to cover it like they did under the accommodation. And suddenly you're out without coverage. And that is where I'm really fearful for people who just will feel, they're in the middle of a state somewhere and have no idea, and they're just going to be out without coverage. And then are they going to get the birth control method that's right for them? When the range of costs can be a few dollars, which for some people going paycheck to paycheck, that could even be prohibitive, to $1,000 for some of the longer term, it's unbelievably disturbing that one boss's own religious beliefs can then dictate whatever then happens after the line. So those rules have been finalized. They go in effect January 14th. There is litigation to enjoin them. We have filed a case. The state attorneys general have filed cases in California, in the Third Circuit in Pennsylvania. So those are ongoing. We'll see what happens now that we're in the finalized rules and not just the interim final rules. But to me, the preamble it's not what is the substance of the rule, but it's where the administration gets to say what they really think. I mean, you could probably talk about preambles being where you put a lot of what you're thinking. It's scary. I mean, it was really the beginning of their chart of where they're going. So then on that same day, the administration issued proposed rule relating to abortion coverage in the marketplaces, in the Affordable Care Act marketplaces, where people go in the individual market to buy insurance. And it basically, it's very complicated, but basically when the Affordable Care Act passed, there were specific rules passed relating to abortion coverage. And the administration is interpreting those rules to mean that a subscriber has to get 2 separate invoices every month for their insurance premium. One that is all of the premium except for the abortion coverage, which is $1, $2, $3 a month, and then 2 for just the abortion coverage. Mail 2 separate letters, 2 separate stamps, and the person has to mail in 2 separate checks to pay it every month. So what's that about? It's about shutting down coverage. Plain and simple. They couldn't do it through Congress. They wanted to. They tried over and over again. They couldn't. So this is their way of doing it, through implementing the law in a way that they think is better. So that's being proposed. The comments will be due January 8th. If you're interested, I can loop you in on the advocacy going on there. But again, there are many comments to comment on. And so this is just going to be, I think, the next couple of years, as they've been the previous last 2 years. There's also a couple other rules that I want to flag. We're waiting for a finalized rule on religious refusals, the right for religious beliefs to dictate patient care. So I don't agree with that care, so I'm not going to do it. And that ranges from reproductive health care to treating transgender individuals, so anything that they disagree in. So then your care is disrupted. It's very dangerous. It is very broad, and it also, again, the administration misinterpreted, wrongly interpreted, just added stuff that doesn't exist in the law related to existing refusal laws. And that's, again, troubling, where they're taking what's on paper and just adding their own, like, text that isn't even there. So a proposed rule got issued earlier this year that could come out. And then there also could be a rule relating to rights under the Healthcare Rights Law under Section 1557 that has to do with non-discrimination in healthcare. So, again, this is all happening in the administration. What then the House and the Senate does is another conversation. So there's just going to be this dialogue, as with all the other issues, as there will be with Title IX, I'm sure, the Title IX rule that came out. So then what is going to happen in the Senate? I think a lot of judges. I think a lot of judges are going to be pushed through. That is McConnell's one goal. He was very successful in the last 2 years. Some of the statistics on this, with what they've done, they have reshaped the judiciary, and it's only the first 2 years. This is something everybody should be incredibly engaged on, because this is where you saw the fight. Oddly enough, this is where we are, where Trump and Roberts are fighting over letters over the Thanksgiving break. The way that they're pushing judges and this partisan nature, it is really destabilizing. Somebody like Roberts is really concerned, although he has written his fair share of opinions that Citizens United, anybody, that, very troubling. But there's one this week, Farr, out of North Carolina, super scary judge who's like racist, and that these are the judges that we're voting on. So that issue affects all of these issues, right? They'll interpret all these. If we get equal pay law passed, or if we get childcare, expanding childcare funding passed, how that interact with those courts. And even if it doesn't make the Supreme Court, the circuit courts have a lot of power. Which I will close then with one point about the Supreme Court. What I am always interested in is these surveys that Catherine YWCA did and Jan talked about. These are our lives. This is our lived experience. We say we are interested in equal pay. We are interested in gun violence. I think if you put climate change in there now, they would say there'd be interest in it. Absolutely. And because this is what we are experiencing. And the Kavanaugh hearing, that outpouring from all these survivors, was the realest experience of this is what people are actually experiencing. And then the response from the Republicans is exactly what it's like to be a reproductive rights advocate on an everyday basis, where they just look at your experience and they say, I don't care. We always had that on reproductive rights and always thought, man, it's just so frustrating, where you'd have a person testify about how cruel a ban is, and they say, okay, great, now just mark it up the bill. And I think that was what was so troubling about one of the many things that was so troubling, correct me, that they just looked in the face of a real experience and said, I don't care. But that is also what brings me hope that what happened in November is not stopping in November, and that continues. Nobody's forgetting that experience. Women are not forgetting that experience. I will not forget going home on the subway and just deciding I'm going to openly cry, and people have to see me cry because you need to see the pain that is out there. We always hide our pain, we hide our anger, and there has been a turning point that I very much see. And so when it comes to reproductive rights, where we've always kind of hid about it, or, don't say, when I go out and talk to people, especially in Tennessee, what do you work on? Reproductive health, right? I work on abortion. I'm very supportive of it. And I think that is where we are, because women, abortion, birth control, IVF, all these issues are a part of their lives, daily lives, and we have hid it because we've been told to. And the Kavanaugh hearing shows us, like, it doesn't matter, that it doesn't matter what it is. It's not that it's repro. We're against all of these lived experiences. And when Kavanaugh, I actually decided to come back to the Law Center after hearing that Kavanaugh was nominated, because I had listened to the oral argument that a friend and coalition colleague, Bridget Amiri from the ACLU, argued that the case with the unaccompanied young woman who was being denied an abortion. That was a telephonic argument, and so you could hear it, which is very rare. And the questions that Kavanaugh was asking and the statements he was making, I was like, this is not how pregnancy works. This is not how the whole thing works. He's like, what if we just waited? It was very flippant. What if we just waited a few weeks? Like, what's the real issue? Or like, aren't they going to, quickly find somebody? And that to me is what we're up against. But that to me says, like, this is why this more women in power is so exhilarating, and that women were so out there with their stories about Me Too, and that they were not running from it. There are single moms on these campaigns that were actually out on it, and that was okay. So I sound very hopeful. I go through my days where I'm like really down. Right now I'm up. Maybe the climate change report, maybe because we're a few days after, I'm feeling better, but there's something we are moving to, and it is real, and it is authentic, and that is exciting.